My co-host, the Blueberry Master. Let me just spotlight you, Chuck, so they could see you. Add spotlight. There you are. Hi.
Hi.
So for those of you that don't know, this full disclosure, we don't just happen to have the same last name. This is Chuck DeWitt. He happens to be my older brother. I only have one brother, so he's my brother. He happens to be older, and he is going to be talking to you all today about blueberries. I don't know if there's anybody, I don't know, there's probably people out there, and you probably know them, that are really passionate about like a fruit. But this is an unusual circumstance. This isn't just an ordinary fruit. This is, some people call it a superfood. Chuck has been eating blueberries and talking about blueberries and growing blueberries and picking them and cooking with them. And he's going to do a program today about why you might want to pay attention to this beautiful little blue fruit. I'm wearing my blue. This is showing blue. It's showing more purpley blue. It's actually showing beautifully. I didn't think it was going to show that nicely today, but I'm wearing in honor of today's talk. I am recording this, and but if people want a copy of the presentation, I can send it out to you all. So if you want to share it or, read it more closely and more carefully, because there's a lot of ground to cover. I have to just tell you that Chuck will not be on the screen. Oh, somebody else is passionate about blueberries and you think you're addicted to them. Well, that's great. Chuck will talk to you about, I don't know that there are any support groups for blueberry addicts, but perhaps you can talk offline afterwards. But you won't see Chuck on the screen. You'll hear him and you'll see the program. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So the name of this program is The Blueberry Connection, How Eating Blueberries Can Change Your Life. And this is all about Chuck. This is my brother, Charles Chuck DeWitt. Like it says here, he spent many years roaming North America, seeking off the beaten path adventures and solitude. He's a graduate of New Mexico Highlands University in Las Vegas, not Nevada, but New Mexico. And he studied history, earth sciences, and he's really taken in the rich geological landscape of the high desert when he was there. He's an environmentalist. He prefers outside work. And like it says, he's been working in the forests of Pacific Northwest, tracking spotted owls, doing tree studies for the Forestry Service, and hunting for edible mushrooms. That is one in his hand. I was there when he found that beautiful mushroom. For the last 12 years, he's assisted blueberry harvesting operations on the coast of Oregon. He's an avid lover, grower, and eater like Jeanette of blueberries, and his partner Deirdre makes incredible blueberry pies. They live with Thor, their Chihuahua, in Bandon, Oregon, and he is my brother. So Chuck, I'm going to show the first slide and you can just go ahead and get us started. Welcome, Chuck.
Thank you, Michelle. Very nice to be here, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. And I hope I can educate everyone at least a little bit on the topic of blueberries. Again, I am not a scientist. Technically, I am simply an enthusiast, but we'll try to keep it flowing. And we're going to cover, first of all, the origin of the blueberry plant and how it was domesticated. Then we'll go into the health and nutritional benefits, which I'm sure most of you are tuning in for. And hopefully at the end, I'll be able to give you a bit of a guideline on consuming berries, which ones to look for, maybe which ones to stay away from. They're all good, but there are gradations. So we can continue on here and we'll talk about the origins of the name. Blueberries are in the Ericaceae family, which is part of the heather family. They are related to plants such as rhododendrons and azaleas, but more specifically, the subfamily Vaccinium is where we're going to be looking today. The Vaccinium family includes huckleberries, cranberries, lingonberries, and bilberries. And the name origin on Vaccinium is Latin from the word vacca, which is cow, because the lingonberry in Scandinavia was also known as the cowberry. So they believe that's the origin of the vaccinium name. The original blueberry name was blaeberry, also Scandinavian 15th century. So that's the background. They are widely scattered throughout the world. These are the vaccinium locations where they can be found. The species goes back a very long time, 100,000 years or so, into the early Pleistocene and onward to the ice ages, when they reappear about 10 to 15,000 years ago in North America. The species we'll be talking about today are familiar local North American blueberry. Will be focused upon, but we're going to kind of take it from the origins, which is the wild story, and then again to today, where we have the cultivated varieties we see in the store. There's kind of a trail we can follow, so to speak. So if we continue on, we will look at the indigenous uses of the blueberry and, of course, their related species. The study area that I focused on was the Pacific Northwest, where I'm located. Back off, Betty, thank you. Not quite ready yet. But the natives, of course, used everything possible for their survival and for their benefit. They had specific uses for specific fruit. And the blueberry was particularly versatile, which we will find out it still is today. They used it for a variety of ailments, and also were able to preserve it by similar methods that we do today, such as making a jam-like substance out of it, or perhaps drying them. When they dried blueberries, often they would be mixed with oily fish, dried into a kind of a cake, which they called pemmican, which was a travel food, a long-lasting sustenance food. And they also, of course, developed methods to enhance production. In the pre-chemical fertilizer era, they figured out ways to enhance the soil through fertilization. They very much involved the use of fire with their patches of berries. By burning patches, they would actually take out some of the competitive plants and fix nutrients back into the soil, which would create a better crop the following year or down the road. And this is a technique still used today in wild production. They also had special tools made, which they devised to increase the speed of harvesting. One of the specialty tools was a salmon backbone rake, kind of a hand rake, where they would rake the plants to get the berries off into their wicker baskets. And you can see the woman in the picture here is a Northwest tribal member. This is about a 100-year-old photo, so it doesn't go back too far, but you can see the basket she's using, I'm sure, is just like the baskets that were used for centuries prior to this photo being taken. So again, they actually also would trade this product with tribes from other locations who didn't have access to this wild fruit. So it was a very valuable fruit. It was a lifesaver, and also specifically used for medicinal difficulties and such. So we take this now through the 1800s and into about the period around 1900, where we meet Betty White. No, not that Betty White. Although we can talk a little about this Betty White, who was pushing her 100th birthday, and she was born at the very beginning of the domesticated blueberry market. She was born about 6 years into the beginning of the commercial production of blueberries. And we can also say she's not a big fan of blueberries. She's gotten to where she's gotten, doing it her way. Blueberries were not a part of it. But for the next Betty White.
Oh, Chuck, you have to tell them what her diet consists of.
Well, I don't want to see, this is secondhand information. I hate to just disparage her in case she's turned to health food recently, but the word is traditionally she was a big fan of hot dogs, chips, and pretty much every not good food you can eat. So bless Betty, she's going strong. She's doing it her way. It shows you can get to 100 many different ways if the story about her diet is true. She may be more famous, but here is the Betty White who has provided so much nutrition for so many people by her inspiration going back to the late 1890s. This Elizabeth Coleman White, to give her full name, was born in the 1870s in southern New Jersey. She's a daughter of a cranberry farmer, Joseph White. They were Quakers. And she was a very integral part of the farm operation. She was the farm manager by her early 20s. And she was a visionary. And she thought, sometime around the 1890s, she thought, due to the local blueberry crop she would see around her cranberry bogs, she really thought there was some commercial viability with blueberries. So she kind of paid attention, put it on the back burner, and 1910 comes along and she reads a agriculture department study written by Fred Colville, Dr. Fred Colville, a botanist, and a light comes on. This study by Mr. Colville was a study he did in New Hampshire near his family property. And he was basically taking wild bushes from one location on the property and then replanting them with soil enhancement, particularly acid. That's the one thing he recognized for the best blueberry cultivation and potential propagation of these wild plants was an increased acid profile in the soil. So once he kind of figured this out, it kind of was the starting point of a potential industry. And Elizabeth White was fascinated by this article, so much so she wrote a letter to Frederick Colville's boss at the U.S. Ag Department, offering to host a study on cultivating wild blueberries at her family farm, which was graciously accepted by the Ag Department, and they began the project in 1912. So from 1912 to 1916, these two individuals, the private cranberry farmer and the public botanist, whose salary was paid for by taxpayer money, and this was very controversial in 1910, 1915. That was not really considered a government role for taxpayer money, getting involved in plant cultivation or production. It was just beginning to be accepted by the populace as something that was benefiting everybody and something the government should be involved in. And this is an example of a very productive private-public partnership on a very small scale at first. So they worked through these years, these formative years, 1912, 1913, 1914, and they're building on successes. They're seeing things work. They're taking clones. They're selecting bushes that are the best bushes locally. They're going to the local blueberry picker saying, can you pick your favorite bushes and flag them so we can go out and take the cuttings from these? And she ends up naming strains of blueberries for these local pickers who guided her to the locations where the berries were. So by 1916, they're ready to go. They've got a commercial crop ready to go. But let's just go to the next slide. And I'm going to read a quote that Betty White says. Actually, this is the slide before, so let me just address this one here too. Pretty much this is what I've been talking about, the letter to the Ag Department. And there's a mention of rube, which is one of the plants she named after rube leek, the ruble. She didn't like the name rube for a blueberry plant, so she went with ruble. But there are many names in these blueberry productions, the early days of the blueberry productions, that exist today. These are originally names of local creeks, people that live by or features of the landscape, they've survived to this day in the strains of blueberries. So all of the original strains come from this part of New Jersey. Although, as we go on, you'll see, you know, they start to develop plants from elsewhere as well, but the origins are all right here. So let's go on to the next slide, and we will read the quote from Miss White that came out in the study. She describes these years, these 4 or 5 years of figuring out how to domesticate the blueberry as a joyous memory. Quote, encouraging developments came thick and fast. Dr. Colville and I gloated over them together, the enthusiasm of each fanning to brighter flame that of the other, end quote. So this was a happy development. These two people worked well together, and by 1916, they were able to start selling blueberry starter plants at local nurseries. So this is where they first started showing up in the marketplace on a regular basis. Before this, the wild pickers would pick and sell. A lot of times they were picking for private families or small markets. And this was kind of the growth of, you know, the market chains and, you know, bulk orders coming in. So you can see the growth of the blueberry as a commercial product and the growth of, you know, food commerce in general kind of coincide. So we're going to take a pretty quick look now to get to today. And here we first we'll just look at White's Bog here. This is how to get there. You can see the original farm where they were developed. You can see, I think, a couple of the original plants are still going, which that's really amazing. Blueberries are supposed to have a shelf life of about 50 to 70 years. So when they keep going beyond 70, that's a healthy plant, and it's not the norm. So I believe you actually can see a few of the original bushes they were using for the project.
Hey, Chuck, you might want to, I just want to mention that at the end of the presentation, I do have a link to a White's Bog website that gives information about, they every year have a blueberry festival, and you can go down and, you know, if you're into it, it's kind of fun. And there's a lot of information about the historic town of White's Bog, and, you know, more information on that. I just want to,
sure,
if anybody's interested, but you can see it's due west of Tom's River. So I wanted to show that as a reference.
So just a little bit south of White's Bog would be a town known as Hammonton, and that would be considered the commercial center, perhaps, of the birth of the blueberry. That they still have farms in operation. They've been going for right around this time, 100 years, since 1916. And so that's where they were first producing in large quantity on these farms. But again, we start the commercial story, the domesticated story, in 1916. And what's important to remember is the genetic developments that Frederick and Elizabeth did on that farm between 1911 and 1915 or so still took place afterwards, but they were taking place on a much larger scale. Universities became involved with developing new strains of blueberries that would be featuring certain aspects that were commercially based. For example, developing bigger clusters of berries, developing plants that had larger individual berries, or perhaps a certain flavor. But again, all of it was based on ease of harvest and how many pounds we can get in a harvest. And this is before the days of widespread mechanical picking. So they were really interested in ease of picking for the purpose of making money. So it's understandable they went away from, they started genetically breeding out aspects of berries such as flavor, certain odd flavors, smallness of berry was phased out, individual, less clumped berries were phased out. So during this period, say from the 1930s through the 50s and 60s, we saw a standardization of blueberries. The individual flavors from the early days, from the wild to the early commercial days, were getting lost into a more generic blueberry flavor. And this was done for commercial reasons. Also a thicker, tougher skin, not necessarily a more nutritionally packed skin, but again, the tougher skin was another development which helped to prevent damage or burn from the sun, or a variety of potential issues. So we see this development through the 1960s. And there's just a side story I'd like to share with you. The local blueberry scene got going here in Southern Oregon. In 1954, a local family purchased over 5,000 plants and planted them on at least 2 locations. We've seen these older plants at other spots too, so we think it was a larger shipment than 5,000. And they came out from Massachusetts. So again, 14 varieties were shipped out. And again, over 5,000 of these made it here. And here we are 70 years later, almost, and these 2 farms are still thriving. And what they have there, because they were planted so long ago, they have a very unique type of blueberry. They would be considered heirloom or heritage berries because of the lost varieties that still exist on these 2 farms. So what I've noticed is the flavor profiles are way more intense. The clustering is way less. So it would show that these were like pre-commercially fine-tuned varieties. And it makes these 2 farms extremely special to us locals. There are many folks from far away who come just to pick these berries. And it's just something that I just had to share. I actually met the person who planted these berries back in probably about 20 or 30 years ago when I first got out here. He was an older gentleman walking around the farm, and he didn't have much to say except, I eat 2 handfuls of these every day. And I've done it since these berries came in 1959. And he lived to 104, I believe. And he was playing the fiddle at his 100th birthday. So I'm not sure how much genetics plays a role, but his berries, I think, played a role in his health. His name was Charlie Jensen. And we appreciate, he's kind of the forefather of our local blueberry scene. So we do appreciate his efforts, Mr. Jensen. So again, as the genetic changes happen, what also happens is the scientists are breeding a berry plant that can sustain pretty much any weather condition. Originally, the wild berries were kind of in the northern or cooler climes of North America. And with the domesticated crops, they started developing varieties that could be planted anywhere. They started planting them first in the South United States, Georgia, Florida, Southern California, Mexico, and then they started spreading out further, Argentina, Chile, Australia, New Zealand. So this is only in the last 20 or 30 years, they've been planted in all these places. In those years, blueberry truly has become a worldwide crop, which is a good and a bad thing, in my opinion. One of the good things is they're readily available for people in other places, not just our country. People who never had access to blueberries before now do. I'm hoping they're keeping some of that local market home, where they're grown. And of course, another aspect which some people would say is that we can buy them now fresh in January or the middle of winter, where normally we couldn't. I'll talk about that a little later, why that may not be so good of a thing. And also the world production has definitely impacted domestic blueberry farmers. Like any other product, when it goes global, the market expands, but sometimes the product expansion exceeds the demand, so the price drops. And we saw this happen in the cranberry market locally, which is, again, we mentioned earlier, it's a cousin of the blueberry in the vaccinium family. The cranberry market, the same model happened where they developed cranberries that formerly couldn't be grown in southern climes to grow down in the South, meaning, again, South America. And only recently, in the last, say, 15 years, have these berries come back to flood our market, which a few years ago wiped out our local cranberry farmers. The price they were getting per pound was something like 9 to 12 cents a pound, which is basically farming at a loss. So again, the globalization of fruit, not a big fan personally. I see benefits in some cases, but the tripling of the market is certainly an eye attention. It's grabbing attention because it's a huge commodity now. There's brokers and players in the game that were never there before. So it's getting a lot of attention. And now we're going to go to why it's getting so much attention. All this positive reporting we hear about blueberry health and how good they are for humans and such. You know, how much do you believe? How much can we trust, you know, this to be true? Are they just trying to sell us some fruit? And the quote that I want to share at this point is from my partner, Deirdre. She said, blueberries are not too good to be true. They're as good as the truth itself. And I really do like that quote, because now we're going to learn what we're talking about as far as their powerhouse status in the food world. Superfoods, well, not a big fan of the term, but it's basically, we're talking about high antioxidant values. The more bang for the buck when it comes to putting food in your mouth and having it activated in your system. You know, we know some foods are neutral, some take out nutrients and aren't really healthy for us, and some actually add what's missing and can help in so many different ways. And blueberries continuously come out at the high end of the list. I think there was a 20-year study, 19 of the 20 years they came out on top in the antioxidant category. And again, these are all-purpose antioxidants. We'll get into it a little bit here. It's just a wide variety of what you're getting in these power-packed fruits. 85% water, but the rest you're going to see a range from vitamins A, C, E, you got potassium, B vitamins, plenty of fiber, folic acid, and trace minerals, choline. I mean, it's a long list of favorable phytonutrients that you can break down and analyze. Here's the cup analyst here. Let's see, we have the caloric breakdown, a little bit of protein, no cholesterol, very little fat, pretty high in carbs, and very good source of fiber, actually. And that would be true for pretty much any blueberry. It's going to be a high fiber content. Sugars vary. That's to see the sugar total there. I would say if it's not ripe, it's going to have less sugar. It does depend on the time of picking. But here we get to the number one phytonutrient, and this is down the line of the flavonoids. This is one of the flavonoids in there. Now, the flavonoid is what gives the berry the color, and the anthocyanin is the flavonoid that's doing a lot of the magic in the blueberry. The list of health benefits is long. I think we're going to have that coming up soon. But we're going to talk more about the compounds here. You can see this is a beautiful picture of really, really colorful food. And blueberries are right there, the top of the list in their color. And in fact, it is interesting to note, I have seen blueberries, commercial blueberries in the past that really didn't look very colorful. And the reason is they were not picked ripe. And this is the danger again about the global market. Picking greenish or red blueberries to have them ripen on the way doesn't really give you the full health benefit at all, because again, it's the color. That's where the benefit is. So if you see berries that are, you know, a little weak colored, or you know, again, look for the deep blue. Look for these are all really good examples of the deep blue. And if it's, of course, a different color plant, just look for the deeper color. And of course, fresher is going to give you more of that, the fresher it is. And here's 6 other foods that are also very high in anthocyanins. This is including, well, I see they have berries generically all together there, but I know blueberries top the list for the berry category, but these other foods, acai and tart cherry, pomegranate, tomato, red onion, all very brightly colored. And it's it's not that hard to figure out. You know, the lesser color, the lesser the nutrient. Here's a cross section giving you a few more of the minerals in there. Copper is one I didn't know about till recently. Folate, of course, is where the folic acid comes from, and the choline. And again, here's a list below that of the phenolic compounds, and this goes right into the phytonutrient section, and it's a long list. It's a complex little fruit, and a lot of these can be isolated. Say, for example, quercetin. I've seen isolated compounds in pill form of quercetin, but to see all of these together gives you a real kind of interactive phytonutrient connection. And I'm convinced that if you took one or two out to isolate it, you would not get the same benefit as the way they all come in the same package. The last one on that list I want to point out also here, chlorogenic acid. That is a compound that is found more concentrated in the leaf of the blueberry, which we'll talk about a little later, leads to the use of leaf in a tea form to extract the chlorogenic acid out, which is, again, one of those compounds that are highly beneficial and not really common in a lot of parts of nature, because the leaves don't always get used. And here's a really interesting cross-section of a lot of details. I never saw this before just recently, and I don't know what a lot of these words mean, being a non-scientist, but it's a fascinating cross-section, no question. You can see the little seeds in there. They do come with little tiny seeds. Most people don't recognize them because they are so small, and the seeds are not very productive. If, for example, you were trying to grow blueberries, the seed would be probably your least successful. There's no packets of blueberry seeds ever. I've only known one person with modest success grow from a seed, but I've heard it's almost impossible to get a full plant out of a seed. We'll talk more about that in the planting section. And here we have our antioxidant circle. Here we have red cabbage and strawberries. Yeah, these are just, again, great to kind of see how they all go together. You see the chocolate up there, the dark chocolate, the green tea. Again, variety is the key. As good as blueberries are, you're not going to live on them alone. And if you can get the interactions going with these other plants, it's just you're going to feel better, most likely. You're going to feel the nutritional change like I did when I first started working in this field. I had a very serious case of chicken pox. This was about 2006. So, you know, it was serious. I was out of commission for 6 months, and blueberries basically got me back going again. And I kind of over-relied on them a little bit. And then I realized, you know, there are side effects too if you overdo any one thing. So getting into that mix of the berries with the, you know, with the grains, and then you have the other richly nutritional foods here. That's really the key. You got to mix it up. Proven benefits. Well, this list could be 3 times longer, but this is what we have for you today. Reduced DNA cellular damage and benefits against aging. So to me, this is kind of like, I'm not sure how this works in the antioxidant world, but the key word here, I think, is cellular signaling. I found that to be very interesting. I looked that up, and this is, like, to me, like, it's like the synapses firing in the brain. That would be a form of cellular signaling. It's one part of the body telling another part of the body what's going on. It kind of connects the body together. And that's the one thing I really noticed when I went into that heavy blueberry zone post chickenpox. I felt the cellular signaling happening because I was really overdoing it. But again, the intensity of the feeling was noticeable. And part of that could be the effect blueberries have on arterial plaque, which we'll get into a little bit later when we talk about Alzheimer's. But I did notice that it seemed to be clearing out my arteries in a way that would allow for less pain, less like joint pain, more clarity, and more just general ease of movement and ease of thought. So it was a self-experiment that I engaged in unknowingly. I really didn't know. I didn't do this intentionally, but the cognitive improvement was clear to me that this was helping to focus. We also see lowers and regulates blood pressure. Positive effects on diabetes, may help prevent urinary tract infections. The anti-inflammatory part is real, and assists in post-cancer radiation treatment recovery. This is a fairly new study. I read it maybe 2 years ago, and again, I'd like to learn more about that. I think they've done more studies since. And again, it's the cellular rebuilding. It's the reducing the oxidization and the damaging. That's the key, I think, to helping in radiation recovery, which, as we know, is often as or more dangerous or deadly than the cancer can be. So we go on with a warning. This was learned by me the hard way. I was never on blood thinners or anything, but I had the effect of, in that heavy blueberry period, of having an occasional hard to control nosebleed. And it basically was because I was thinning out my blood too much, or at least it was affecting me that way. So I would definitely go easy if you're taking any kind of blood thinners. And here we go into the Alzheimer's part of the story. And again, I gave you my personal story about feeling a brain cleansing, so to speak, just a neuron firing kind of feeling where things were coming to me quicker and making more sense and all of those good things. Now, here we learn animal studies indicate that blueberry extracts improve memory by influencing Bdnf, a protein that supercharges your brain levels and protecting brain cells in the memory center of the brain. Bdnf, that's something new for me. I've not read much about that, but again, personally, they seem to help my brain function. And now it's fun to go back and see studies kind of helping to prove what I kind of felt was truly happening. My idea was to open an Alzheimer's research center on a blueberry farm. And I hope somebody does this someday. And it seems to me obvious to do a simple cognitive test before they get set up, put them on a blueberry diet, and do a post-test after a certain amount of months. And I don't think there'll be any result other than positive. I mean, some people might be allergic. It might not help everyone the same, but it's hard to imagine it not benefiting people, especially early onset Alzheimer's.
Chuck, I'm going to jump in here for a quick second. Mention so this for those of you that were on the call back in January, we had a Zoom call with a friend of mine who became a model, like a supermodel, not a supermodel, but a fashion model at a later age. She actually told a little bit of the story, how she was really diagnosed with this preclinical stage of Alzheimer's. And she went to see Dr. Richard Isaacson. And again, I mean, this is her story, but she read this, he recommended that she follow a diet, and she is really staved off, and she's living a very full and vital life, and without any real sign or symptom, by just changing her diet and her lifestyle. So I just connected that story because some of you had already heard her story, and changing a diet, and every single morning she eats a cup of blueberries without fail. And she had never liked blueberries, never ate them before, didn't really have much to do with them. And so anecdotal, sure, but this is somebody that I happen to know who has been following this. She's a patient of Dr. Isaacson's, and he actually writes about her. I think he writes about her in this book because this is like several years of changing her diet. And so there's a lot of research, but I just wanted to include that. And
was that the older, beautiful older lady, like 85 years old?
She's not 85. She's in her late 70s, but she
beautiful woman. Yes.
Very, very helpful to her. And you know, this Chuck was talking about. I don't know if you want to just speak to this slide, Chuck.
Yes. No, that's fine. It's pretty self-explanatory.
So again, with the antioxidants, metabolic and heart health. But this is Diana, if you remember her. And she talked about the brain healthy food groups. She talked about berries being like how she started her day. And she starts her day to this day. And then this mind diet is really this Alzheimer's diet, which includes these 10 foods, the green leafy vegetables, other vegetables, nuts, berries, particularly blueberries, beans, whole grains, fish, a little bit of poultry, olive oil, and wine. And I don't know, Chuck, do you want to talk a little bit about, I guess, the same antioxidant, you know, that skin. It's that yep. Dark purpley, you know, particularly red wine. I don't think
red wine. That's right.
Yeah. So and Dr. Isaacson, you know, and recommends drinking a glass of, you know, red wine a day. Obviously, you want to check with your doctor before you make any dietary changes, but that wine is included in that list.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, so
sorry, here you go.
Okay, so we'll continue and kind of conclude here with some consumer information about the berries that you might find in the store or at the market. And I just have recommendations, nothing set in stone. And I preface everything by saying all blueberries are good, but some are better than others. And that's what we'll try to get to here to finish up. The studies you see on health, all the studies that we just talked about, and you can go research yourself, at least almost all of them have been done with conventional domesticated blueberries. So you can increase the benefit if you shrink the berry. And what I mean is it's the wild versus domestic argument. Okay, so most blueberries we see in the store fresh. In fact, all blueberries we see fresh are, okay, all the blueberries we see fresh are domesticated, okay? The ones we see fresh in the little baskets, all domesticated. There's no wild blueberries available fresh unless maybe you live in Maine or somewhere in that location. So that's the first thought. But you can always find wild blueberries in the frozen section of your store. And that's what we're going to talk about right now, the difference between the large, fresh, domestic and the frozen, smaller, wild. The studies I mentioned were done with the larger berries, but the benefits increase if you go to the smaller wild berry. It's because they have a denser skin with higher flavonoid compound amounts. It's just, it's a deeper color. And here's a test you can do. You can take a handful of frozen domestic berries and take a handful of frozen wild berries and put them in a really white bowl and let them defrost. And you'll see which one has more color. It's going to be the wild ones. And that's the proof that that's the berry you should be eating if nutrition is your thing. If you like the flavor of the larger berry, and believe me, I think they're delicious. Most domestic versions really are tasty. Combine the two. You can get the fresh, local, in season in New Jersey, or fresh from California or Florida, you know, in the shoulder seasons, and mix it with the frozen wild for a kind of a full package with the flavor and the nutrition increase. You really are covering your bases there. So that's my recommendation, just if you want to kind of just experiment with both of them. But one thing I would avoid, and we talked about it earlier a little bit, is the berry that's coming from outside of North America. I I just don't really trust the foreign markets to send us food in many cases. Oftentimes, the countries that are sending us the food from the plants we sent them 20 years ago, they're using practices that we don't really do in this country very much as far as chemicals they use. We've banned them and then sold them to these countries. I'm not specifically pointing out blueberry farming, but just in general, farming can be very unregulated in many of these places. So the trust level is low. And also just what we talked about earlier, the shipment. You're getting berries that are shipped from far away that aren't picked fresh or aren't picked ripe. They're picked pre-ripe. They don't fully ripen, and you're getting kind of a lame berry is how I would describe it. I won't touch a berry from Brazil or anywhere in the wintertime. I'll just eat the frozen ones and wait till the fresh ones come in. So that's just my own personal thing. And in season, when they're available locally, look for the closest place possible to where you live on the label. You know, Hamilton, New Jersey, you'll see a lot of Hamilton berries in New Jersey in the summertime. They're very fresh. They're definitely coming up just a day or two away. So that's where you want to go. And if you can, put some in the freezer from the fresh season. Put some away that you know are fresh. If you can pick them yourself, even better. If you can get to a U-Pick place, you know that they're right off the bush and they're extremely powerful. Put them away. Tuck them away in your freezer. You'll have really potent berries all winter. And we'll talk a little about organic as well. I personally prefer organic anything, but there in the blueberry world, when it comes to wild blueberries, there really are no such thing as wild organic. Wild is presumed organic because it's wild. There's no chemical applications in wild farming. They do manage, like we talked about earlier, similar to natives. They'll burn crops. They'll add natural fertilizers, perhaps. They'll prune, but there's nothing non-organic going on. There's nothing, chemical-wise. So you can trust wild, especially from Maine and Canada. That's where the bulk of our wild crops come from in this country, and very consistent, very trustworthy product coming from there. And organic to me is better in general, though. Overall, it doesn't mean that they're going to be more nutritious necessarily, but there's less residual damage in the long run on the farm, for the water underneath the farm, and all those different places. Farming can be very messy. Commercial farming is has extreme toxic residues. So I do promote organic wherever possible.
Chuck, should I just show a little bit of this clip? Can you see this clip coming up?
I can see it. You can show a little bit. It's kind of boring. Sure.
No, but I just want to show, this is the harvesting, but this is in New Jersey. And I just want to show people, from start to finish, what that looks like, because I think, obviously if you could, like you said, if you could hand pick them, but it's a whole process with this giant truck thing. So let me just give people a little taste of what that looks like. I'm just going to fast forward Gotta be a better way.
Oh, there is.
Now, what is this?
This is a Corovan 8000 blueberry harvesting machine. This is a lot faster. The blueberry bush goes in the middle of these plates, and as that machine pushes through, the blueberries come down and into the processing facility we go.
Can I drive it, please?
I have one question.
What?
Can you handle it?
Man, watch my smoke. Come on, let's go. Sitting on top of that tractor, I felt like Superwoman. Look out, blueberries! I don't think I'd ever go back to cars again, sitting that high up. I loved it. I want you to show me all your crazy fun gadgets.
You're going to see it all. I have a soft sorter. This machine is taking out any berry that's soft, and I also have the color sorter, which, as you can see, is taking out the green and red.
I had no idea that a blueberry farm would be so scientific.
Interesting. All right.
Well, How about that?
Yeah.
That let me just comment on what I just saw there. It shows you what music and editing can do to make a pretty boring task seem exciting. Because I was on one of those machines last year and it was not that exciting. It was about as slow an action event as you can have at about half a mile an hour. But
now,
boy, that sure seemed.
That doesn't damage the bush.
It does damage the bush slightly, but it's relatively okay. The bushes are watered and flexible, and they don't break usually. The problem with that kind of harvesting is the mess that they didn't show you that you have to. They don't come out clean. In other words, you have all that air blowing out the junk. You still have to go through and hand clean them. So it does save time, but it's not quite as clean and simple as it looks. You're still cleaning further, and we didn't have those fancy sorting machines either. We were doing all that stuff by hand. So. And
when you pick by hand, how many pounds can you pick in a day by hand?
Last year, I hit a couple of days up to 80 pounds a day. That's pretty much a 8-hour, 10-hour day. That was at the farm I worked at last year, though, was easier to hit a higher number. At the farms I mentioned earlier, the Jensen's farm, the numbers are, I never hit 40 pounds a day, and I did that for a long time. So, again, half the size berry, you're picking half as many. You pick the big ones, it's easier to get the pounds up there. But yeah, I think I hit 80 once.
Yeah, it took a lot of time to pick the amount of blueberries we picked for 2 pies.
Correct. And they were the smaller ones there. That was Jensen's we were at. Yeah.
I want to talk about, this is our family's go-to brand, but if you shop at Trader Joe's, these are available all year round, pretty much.
Yes. And if Trader Joe isn't available, then most grocers will have a brand called Wyman's, Wymans, out of Maine. They get the same berries from Canada. They don't always have US grown berries, but very consistent, very good company. And I support them heavily. And I call them medicine berries. And when I say that, people give me a funny look because people don't take blueberries seriously like I do. They think, oh yeah, I'm going to put some on my cereal. Oh, I had some on my ice cream last night. And that's fine. But I'm serious. I'm like, no, this is medicine. It's not the drugstore over there. They have medicine too. But that little, it's a $5 bag in our grocery store. It's 1 pound for $5, which is not cheap compared to Trader Joe, but it's a bargain at $5 a pound. That one bag can last you a week, a handful or two a day. So for $5 extra a week, you're going to be improving your health. I think it's a deal. I think it's a steal.
Mm. Could you mention that last, just to reiterate that last tip about cooking on the list there?
About what?
Cooking.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. Okay. Yes. It's always found this strange, but I've been told since I first started doing this and making jams and such that blueberries are one of the only foods that you can cook and get it up to a high temperature and not destroy the components of health, the anthocyanins and the polyphenols. It's amazing. I thought heat pretty much killed everything, and it does. And we use the heat to sanitize the jars and all, but it doesn't kill the berry medicine, which I find fascinating. I don't really have any scientific information on why that is, but
but if you think about it practically, like if you cook broccoli, like deep green broccoli, and you cook the bejesus out of it, it turns like kind of a light green, mushy green color. When you cook blueberries, they stay as blue gets. Like they actually stain. They still stain. I mean,
they get it condenses the color almost. Yes,
same thing. Tomatoes. That maybe it's the anthocyanin. Like the tomatoes, same thing. Pomegranate, same thing.
Yep.
Just thinking about all those foods that stay the color that they are even through the cooking process.
Right. It's like a natural preservative in there that preserves the health benefits. And here's another thought about blueberries and their their sturdy nature as far as they just don't break down easily. Blueberries are very unusual in the fruit world in the fact that they don't ever mold. I've been around blueberries so much, and I've had them on the counter, found them in my truck. You know, I'm surrounded by them for 2 months every season, and it takes a lot to get blueberries to mold. I mean, strawberries will mold in a day or two. Blackberries, every other berry around here goes moldy in the fridge if you leave it in there too long. But blueberries just, I don't think they have any. There's no sign that they're susceptible to it, which just makes them more, amazing, really.
Can you recommend? Oh, sorry. Can you recommend a plant to grow in New Jersey? I grow 3 different types of blueberry plants, but they haven't produced a lot, and I have to fight the birds also.
That's an important thing. Is birds really do their damage on the crops, and if you only have 3 plants, they can really wipe you out. I would recommend this. I would write those 3 types. You have 3 different types of blueberries?
I think 2 of them are the same.
Okay, so get those 2 names of the ones you have. Two of the 3 are 2 different kinds, and mention that to a local knowledgeable nursery person, and they will tell you the best additional plant to add, because blueberries cross-pollinate. Okay. So there are certain ones that work better with other certain ones. And I don't know which are the 2 you have, so I wouldn't know which one to recommend, but somebody does, and they can fit you in with the right blueberry plant, which could increase the production of your existing plants.
Okay. Or Whitesbog.
Someone in Whitesbog should know. Yeah, there's also a blueberry research center at the University of Maine Orono campus. It's the leading informational resource for wild blueberries and planting and cultivating and nutrition. So another good source to know about.
They might know. Yeah.
Yes.
So we're almost at the end. You want to just finish talking about this, and then we can take some questions.
Okay. Other uses here. We mentioned the leaf with the high chlorogenic acid profile. There's a bowl of blueberry leaf that's been dried. I usually wait till they turn red in the fall to pick them. The red, again, indicates the higher nutritional content. And I use about 8 leaves per a cup of tea. If the leaves are less strong, I might use double that amount. I crumble them up in the pot of water, get it up to a boil, let it sit for a while. I add other herbs, lemon balm and whatever else, and let it sit, steep, strain it out, and it's some really powerful tea that really tastes like tea. If the leaves are dried properly, there's a very strong tea component, and we use them in the summer just in sun tea jars. We'll just put handfuls in glass jars, leave them out, and we have delicious iced tea ready to go that has some health benefits too.
But it doesn't taste like blueberries.
Doesn't taste at all like blueberries. People are confused. They expect it to be tasting like blueberries, and so you could call it anything leaf. They don't really, the blueberry thing kind of throws them off a little bit, but technically it's not a tea, it's a tisane or an infusion, an herbal infusion. That's the word for that. Blueberries are used for things we don't even think about, like cosmetics or dog food. It shows up in 4,000 different products have blueberry in them right now. So again, all over the map. I see you have your blueberry shrub mentioned here.
I forgot to put the picture on, but I actually make a fresh jam, like a homemade jam with blueberries, very little sugar because you don't really need it, and maybe some mint. And then I'll just mush that into muddle, that's the correct bartender's term, muddle that with some rosemary, maybe some fresh herbs, and then add gin or vodka and a little bit of club soda or something. And it's a really nice cocktail.
I think people are getting more creative with the blueberries as a food item for different ideas like that. And this does occasionally lead to not very good ideas. Like a lot of the blueberry beer I've had has been not very good. Like we can leave that out of beer, I think, for the most part. I think I've had 1 or 2 okay varieties. But some ideas, they might be stretching it a little bit. And again, we have our little happy family blueberry there. That's from a farm locally here near Myrtle Point, Oregon. And that's how we'll say goodbye. So questions I'm happy to help with.
I have, Chuck, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go because I do have questions in the chat and I want to start in order so that people, okay. So, so we know Jeanette's passionate and people are happy to meet you. And okay, well, we'll get to know the rest of the family, Jennifer. We'll have a family meeting and we'll meet everybody. Is there guidance on the amount of blueberries to consume daily from Mary Ann?
Well, two handfuls, like a cup and a half, maybe 2 cups. That wouldn't be overdoing it for sure. And stay steady with it, I think is what Michelle's friend was talking about too. You know, keep it as a regular part of your diet and you don't have to overdo it. I think for me, I was just like, I was picking and popping them in and eating by the handful. And it's like, they were so good, I couldn't stop. So, you know, that's where I kind of overdid it and, you know, had some issues, but no, I think 2 handfuls a day is a good,
probably a cup because that seems to be the recommended
cup and a half.
Like, you know, recommended depending on the size of the blueberry. The wild ones are smaller. So, but you know, how many, you know, handfuls, you know, it depends how big your hands are, but you know, cup, you know, you want a little boost, you could probably add a little bit to that.
The consistency is important. Keeping it going, you know, like taking your daily vitamin pill. It's kind of like that.
Yep. Great presentation, Chuck. Somebody says we picked at Emery's in New Egypt. Is that New Jersey? Emery's?
Yep, it is. Yes.
Down south in Maryland?
I believe so.
Yeah, it's off Route 539. It's north of White's Bog.
Okay.
That might be the closest one. That might be the closest one to White's Bog where you can go picking.
Yeah, well, there's another one. I don't remember the name, but we've gone there. I went for the first time 2 years ago and loved it. And then later in the season, last year, my son and daughter-in-law went and bought a 10-pound bag of their frozen blueberries. So we're going to be stocking up like crazy. And I'm going to look for the wild ones. I had no idea that they sold wild ones frozen because I remember Maine years ago, they were incredible.
Oh yeah, they're the best. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a way we always in our family kind of try to describe the bluiness. But there's a watery blueberry that I think my dad likes. I'm, you know, the kind you buy at ShopRite. You know, he always buys that little pint when they're on sale. And to me, unless it's like high season, what's high season here in New Jersey for blueberry?
July, August, probably the same as here. July, August,
June,
maybe a little earlier.
Yeah.
We can start in June. You know, you should call, you know, like sometimes we'll call Emery's to find out when we can go pick.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a great idea though, stocking up on the freezer berries. Again, you picking is the ultimate experience for nutritional benefits because you're getting berries. If you're popping them as you're eating them, like I do, or, you know, you can get them by the handful, wash them out and eat them. You're getting the top nutritional profile. They only deteriorate from the second they're picked right on down the line. So 1 second old is really high nutrition. Whereas, you know, 14 days old, it's kind of washed out by then. So you pick them and you freeze them and you're gonna lock in the nutrition.
Jennifer wants to know if we can go to a blueberry farm field trip. That would be fun.
Yes.
Yeah,
we could go see White's Bog and you know, see the Betty White's. Oh man. Although Jeanette, the berries you eat all the time do you eat the Boreal from Trader Joe's? Are those ones you're eating? I don't know if she's still on.
I'm still here. Yeah. I eat all different kinds of berries that, you know, wherever I can get them, but I do stock up on the ones from Trader Joe's because the wild berries really have a different flavor.
Yeah.
That I really enjoy. And I'll eat them in smoothies. I put them in my oatmeal. I eat them defrosted plain. I use them for so many things. I really love blueberries.
Yeah.
I saw a question pop up a little while ago. Let me address it. Somebody asked a question about drying blueberries with reference to the anti-molding agent. We do dry blueberries frequently, and they do dry well and they hold well. The trick though is it's hard to dry them when they're not the same size. If you have a variety of sizes, they tend to dry at different rates, different speeds. So you'll end up finishing with some still mushy and some dry and some over dry. So the uniformity of size is key for the drying. And we use a commercial, not a fancy large one, but a commercial grade dehydrator. Excalibur is the name, I believe. And we pop the berries so they break. We don't leave them whole. We'll just pop them a little and press them into the screen. They dry like raisins when they're dried properly and at their peak, and they're fantastic. Another way we've been doing berry preservation is fruit roll-ups. This is new this year. We are cooking. It's almost like you're making jam where you add the wild we do wild plus our local berries, which are domestic, but they're very good and natural and sweet. Mix them together, mash them up, and we shred 2 apples, peeled and shredded, mix it all in, mash it up. And I've also been using spruce tips, which is something new for me in the last couple of years, harvesting spruce tips in the spring, which is just about now, they're ready. We'll pick them off, dry them, freeze them, infuse them into this mixture of berries and apples. While we're cooking, you get it up to a boil, make sure it's all mashed. You can also, of course, use a food processor, which is the quick way to do it. And parchment paper on the dehydrator, and we just drop little splotches, flatten them out, and we dry them into really delicious fruit roll-ups. We've been enjoying the heck out of them. And you add a little sugar too. That helps kind of, keeps everything together. Really, it's really enjoyable way to do it. And we don't even roll. We call them roll-ups, but we don't roll them because they're hard to roll. They're just strips, like leather.
Leather, yeah.
Fantastic. Carry them with you all day. It's a great snack. It's an energy boost. Very good. I see the question has come up with sugar. We use coconut sugar has been our favorite. But, any good grade cane sugar is fine. And again, the recipe called for a lot, like jam does. You need to, in most jam recipes, you put a lot of sugar in there, but there's ways around it. There's, you can use healthy versions and reduce the amount and not worry so much. It's more about, for me, it's the texture rather than the taste. The berries are sweet enough. They don't really need more sugar, but the texture does, adding some sort of grainy sweetener seems to make a difference.
Chuck, do you know if cranberry sauce, that same rule applies about cooking and retaining its, antioxidant?
I don't know that for certain, but my guess is that because again the color stays. I think the nutrition stays. It's a vaccinium. Cranberries and blueberries are cousins, so I would imagine you're still getting your nutrients there with the jam. The question from Carol was about the suggestion of a blueberry plant in New Jersey, and your suggestion is to maybe call up the farms down in Whitesboro or even contact like the Blueberry Council. A nonprofit type educational group, because nurseries are going to be hit and miss. You might get kids who don't know anything and they're just going to say I don't know, or if you get lucky and you find an owner who's into it, you'll get some help. But you're better off getting the knowledge first sometimes and then going to look for your product. If you get the idea, again, identify the 2 types you have, relay them to someone who knows, and say what's a cultivar that would work with these 2 to help me cross-pollinate, because I'm not getting enough fruit production on the 2 kinds that I have. They will point you in the right direction.
So someone's commenting, I have had the blueberries mold, but you never know how they were kept before you bought them. I think sometimes if they get wet, right?
Correct. It's the water that's molding, really. Yeah, that's right.
And if they're old, if they're old and wet, or if they get wet, they say that with berries you shouldn't wash them. Wash them right before you eat them. So don't wash them and put them in the fridge.
That's right.
Keep them and then wash them as needed. Try not to get the whole bowl wet, because then they will get moldy.
Right. And that's important for freezing too. The challenge with freezing berries is it's not easy to wash a frozen berry. because it's just, you're freezing in particles and dirt, and then it has to kind of thaw, and then you're washing kind of already mushy fruit. So one way to do it is you wash the berries lightly, dry them, not dehydrate, but just make sure there's airflow and they dry off from the moisture, or towel dry them, and then freeze them. And you'll have a much better chance at, just clean berries with no worries. I have forgotten to do this, and I have dealt with like dirt and garbage that's hard to get off once it's frozen.
I freeze my berries on a cookie sheet, so they're all separate, and then put them in a baggie.
And they roll right out then. That's a great way to do it. If you have the room, we don't always have the room, but yes, that's a preferred way.
Great idea.
Yes. And then you can also, here's another idea too. Like going back to frozen berries, we learned this trick. It's a good idea to keep smaller containers of berries available, almost like not single servings, but maybe like 2 or 3 days worth in a smaller container out of your larger container. Because if you continuously open a 10-pound bag to get a handful out, those berries won't stay fresh by opening that bag all the time. They're going to start to get freezer burn smell and all that. So we kind of subdivide, and we'll take handfuls out ahead of time and then leave that frozen bag frozen in the back of the freezer until we're ready again for our next download, so to speak.
Yeah. Are blueberries good for your eyesight?
Absolutely, absolutely true. That's one of the earliest studies done. It was in England during World War II. They were trying to increase night vision capabilities for fighter pilots, and they found that the bilberry, which is the European cousin of the blueberry, was excellent for helping pilots see at night, and they started prescribing bilberry to their pilots back in World War II. That's the earliest official study that I know.
Interesting. And yes, they do contain the lutein, right? The lutein.
Yes. Yes.
And you answered the sugar question. So I think that's it. I don't think we have any more questions, but you covered so much. And if anybody would like, I can send the presentation if you'd like it. So just send me an email asking for it, or you can put it in the chat and I'll jot it down that you want it. If you know people that missed it, the talk, and make sure they let me know, and I'll send you the actual presentation so that you can hear Chuck talking and all that. So it's an actual recording. Anyway, thanks, Chuck.
Well, thanks to everybody. And also, I just want to mention, I would be happy to answer any further questions through Michelle. So please, feel free. If you come up with anything, I'm happy to help. Hope to point you in the right direction. But again, thanks for being there. It's fun to talk about and share this information.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Yeah, I'm so glad. Thanks, Chuck. I really appreciate it.
Also, can we also plug part 2?
Yeah, part 2.
Okay, we're going to do a part 2 on this, and part 2 is going to be on the farm mostly. We're going to go to the place where I worked last year, Twin Creek Ranch. We're going to talk to the owner, and he's going to run through the planting and the pruning, and I'm sure the flowers are going to be coming in at that time. The leaf production will be coming in, so it'll be a nice look out there on a very beautiful farm. Yeah, and then so at least part of the next one will be out there. Yeah.
And then we'll have maybe a pre-recorded video of a cooking demo. So that'll be sort of a combination of what do you do with them once you get them, and we'll infuse that footage from the farm from Oregon. So it'll be kind of like you're on vacation in a way, kind of like 2 years ago when we went there. You'll get to sort of feel it and see it, and then maybe Deirdre can cook us up some of her pie, or you can make some of your jam, and then maybe I'll make a shrub and we can have a little cocktail hour.
That's good. Sounds good. Coast to coast cocktail. All right.
With goat cheese, anyone? Anyway, thank you so much. And maybe if we're really good people, you'll send us some samples.
You know what? I'll tell you what I can send. I can definitely send some fruit roll-ups. I would like to share them because we think that it might be a marketable thing. We're trying to get some feedback because we think that the idea of a blueberry spruce connection is just untapped and delicious and healthful too. Spruce has very high vitamin C content. So we're happy to share them, and we've been making a lot. So I'll send some out, and maybe you can get some samples out to your folks there.
And we'll even plug we'll plug another program that Chuck will do in the future. But maybe during mushroom season, Chuck can bring us on a mushroom hunt. It's providing their service. Yeah. And then you can find out how to well, I don't know if there are any good mushrooms around here to find, but
there are. They're everywhere.
Oh.
My grandkids harvested mushrooms in Oregon with their uncle, and we have some in the jars. Lobster mushrooms for one, and I forget the others. So they were out there, you know, with their packs and everything, and they learned how to harvest mushrooms.
It's a lot of fun. It's like a big treasure hunt.
Yeah.
And to me, blueberry picking's the same. It's a treasure hunt. You know, I get so lost out there. It's just they start piling up, and I lose track of time, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing.
Yes. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Chuck, just stay on because Mom and Dad are on, and I think they're behind the scenes somewhere. So.
Okay.
Thank you, Michelle. This was great. Oh.
Thank you.
Yes, this was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Chuck.
I have some blueberries right now.
I have a recipe I'm going to share. Oh, is that the leather? What is that?
Okay, see what this is? This is the paper left over from the leather. That Deirdre, she cut the border out and she made a flower out of it that actually has blueberry smell on it. It's like potpourri.
Oh,
check it out.
Wow.
Check it out.
Are they edible?
This is the paper remnants. The paper remnants.
Oh wow!
It's the stain. It's such a strong stain. It comes through to the paper, and then she made these flowers, which are actually fragrant.
Oh, that's lovely.
We'll show you how to make these, maybe too.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah. You can market those.
Yes.
They're beautiful. Wow. Thanks.
Stationery. Scented stationery.
Yeah.
Blueberry scented stationery.
Well, I'm having a fruit leather right now.
Right. Yeah, that I would say there would definitely be a market for that.
Well, I want to see. Can I see? Oh.
It kind of looks like Argentina.
Uh-huh.
No, not really. And then it's just, that's where you get the art supply from. That's our art supply right there.
You should go on Shark Tank.
It's very good.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all.
I don't know what's going on, but I'll have to call them offline because they don't seem to be responding to my, I don't know. Oh, well. All right. We'll be in touch. Thanks, Chuck. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.